Morning and welcome into HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Whew, it is early, isn't it? 6 a.m. Central Time here in the 501. It's another Thursday where I will be out of town and got to get out of here a little later this time than last week. I think it was a week ago. We came on early because I had a full slate and a lot of stuff going on out of town. So we're going to try to keep this brief if I can possibly do that. But thank you for joining me. I'm Kevin McPherson, and really I'd say two pieces of intel this morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the mock drafts that have come out since Tuesday. We know Carter Knox went in the portal a week ago. Announced it, not the portal, excuse me, the NBA draft pool, to go through the process, test the waters. So there's been a few mock drafts several days later. That was last Thursday when he made his announcement, and then there's been mock drafts that were updated in the last couple of days. So I'm just going to go. I have three of them. I tweeted these out, but I'll kind of mention it just because we're keeping an eye on Carter Knox. Everything we're talking about today is about roster and where do things go. It's been kind of a roller coaster, right? When we go back to last Thursday, again, right after Knox made that announcement, you had the retention video. You see everybody coming back. You see the signed players talking about they're all in. You get a real good idea of what your roster looks like with maybe one or two more additions to go. That's what our talking points were. If you remember the last part of that video, it was John Calipari. It was his video, by the way, and he said, we're not done yet. So we were all thinking, okay, well, that's obvious. We're thinking that's right. Morning, Kev. Appreciate the update. Absolutely appreciate you being here. It is early. So we had the video, and then come Monday, we had Easter weekend. It was quiet, right? As expected. Then come Monday, you had this blow up over the Chad Baker Mazar stuff that came from a national reporter, Jeff Goodman. And the next thing you know, the staff's reaching out to the local media, including myself, very vehemently, but hey, we like the 10 we have. They're talking about Carter Knox among the 10. That's what gets you to 10. And so even though he's in that process, they understand that technically at some point he's going to come back to count toward the retention. That they feel confident that's probably what's going to happen. We'll see what happens. I also believe as of now that's probably the most likely scenario, but they're happy with the 10 they have. And then it was phrases like, unless someone special becomes available. And then that was amended a bit to include someone if it makes sense. This idea if it's the right situation. And it's in line with what Cal's talked about when he talks about, pulling players out of the portal, right? All right, so that was Monday's talk. And, if you remember when we came on to break the news to you and explain everything on Monday, I think it was later Monday, I mentioned, hey, this is what it looks like with the 10 deep. Here's 20 minutes talking about taking the staff at face value. And then the next few minutes after those 20 were talked about, I'm not buying this. It's my job to keep looking into this because I still think they're probably going to add other pieces. And, kind of went through some of the usual suspects and what Arkansas needs, shooting, frontline depth, that kind of stuff. It's hard to believe they're, turning a blind eye to some needs that are still there, even with 10 players. And so that was kind of where we've been. I mean, even yesterday I came on last night or yesterday afternoon, went through the 10 they have now because we're kind of bored and waiting. They're pumping the brakes. Maybe we have to wait a while. This idea that they're going to get us to avert our eyes away from it by telling us, nothing to see here. I mean, it's going to take a small army to hold my ass down from checking on this stuff and, turning over every leaf I can to do the job. This is the job. We cover Arkansas Razorbacks basketball. We're in portal season. We're in roster build mode. So I'm not convinced of anything. Well, it's a good phone call I had last night. This is the first piece of intel. Kind of wanted to lead up to it to kind of push us ahead to, go back to come back to the future here, to the present, to where we are now, because even though we still believe that Arkansas is going to add pieces, that's still a bit vague. And the staff said what they said, right? So it's not real clear. Well, then what? Well, who might be special? What is the, what else would make sense? We know what the roster needs are. To us, that makes sense, but they're not specifically saying that. Well, the staff's talking, and this didn't come from a conversation directly with me. This wasn't a conversation staff to me. Some of the stuff we've been relaying lately has been on this. This is a little different, and it's interesting. So this will not give you an answer or give you breadcrumbs leading you to the who, but maybe the how many. Because a source who had a conversation with an agent, direct conversation, one of my best sources, said that just a very recent conversation, I guess the last probably 12 to 16 hours, since now that we're on. So last night at some point or yesterday afternoon, with an agent that has had a direct influence on this coaching staff, Arkansas's coaching staff, on helping a player get to Arkansas. I won't name who the player is, but in a conversation with that agent and one of Arkansas staff members, again, within the last day, not even 24 hours, a comment from the staff to this agent was, we're going to add one more. We're looking to add one more. Now, a lot of times when you get source information, you want to consider, well, who's the staff telling that to? If it was somebody asking or prying or filling them out, or maybe there's a player that they're trying to push they're not interested in, or maybe there's a concern that they're going to push information on to another coaching staff, something like that, you're wondering, well, how valid is that? Maybe are they really showing them their cards? This is an agent that helped deliver a player to this current staff at Arkansas. Again, I won't tell you who that is. I doubt the staff is blowing smoke, about numbers like that to somebody like that who has helped them and may help them again and may be a key part of some. So having said that, think about that. So I didn't talk to the agent. My source spoke directly with them and got in touch with me shortly after that conversation. And that's coming from the staff. Now, what do we know? If Carter Knox stays in the NBA draft, you're going to need more than one. You're going to need two. They're happy with the 10 that they have. I'm assuming conversations they may be having about what they're adding takes into account the 10 that they have. So 10 plus 1's 11. What did Calipari say for the longest time? Maybe it's been a while. I don't know how many times he said it. It seems like a while ago, but we reported to you that we were hearing the resources would be there to help him get enough players so that Arkansas didn't go through the attrition issues like it did last year, and would have an answer for that and would help them, as part of that, be competitive for a national championship, get to a Final Four, that kind of thing. And that the roster would go from 9 to at least 11. Well, then Calipari used that 11 number. Well, if you added one more, 1 plus the 10 that they're happy with right now, that would be 11. Again, if Carter Knox stays in the draft, you would then need, I guess, 2 players to get to 11. If you're happy with 10 now, needing to add 1, Carter Knox out of the picture, then you're at 9, needing to add 2. So don't forget that part of it. Don't forget also that conversation, the staff has been a bit, all over the place. Thursday, it was, we're not done yet. Monday, it's, we may not do anything else. It'll have to be some circumstance that works out just right for us to do anything else. We don't rock the boat. Okay. Again, we can believe all we want that they're likely going to do something, but when they say things like that, that's what's coming from the horse's mouth. So this is a little bit different because the horse talking to someone else behind the scenes, it's gotten back to me. That's been the conversation, but that could change too. Let's say that that's what they think and they just can't find the right piece, and it's not, they don't want to force something in there just to get another body. Maybe when they're telling someone in confidence that they got one more to go, maybe they already know who it is and they're just waiting for whatever, the draft process, something being negotiated, maybe a name that's been in the portal that they're still, that we've seen, and they're still piecing that together and they're not quite there yet. 2 more, knowing we're getting Carter Knox back, guys that maybe not play a whole lot, but give you more depth, insurance. So those things can change, but I found that fascinating as a talking point from the staff to someone they trust, someone that's helped that staff. So I find that valuable. Yeah, I don't have breadcrumbs to lead you to a who, but a how many. And we were talking in generalities leading up through all of this when Cal said, we're not done yet, leading up to maybe we're happy with just sitting with what we have. We were still talking about with that roller coaster of information before, middle of it, and after. 1 to 2 more additions make sense. So this isn't earth shattering. Oh gosh, the staff said something that no, we've been saying this, but given what all played out, to hear that, it almost sounds a bit definitive. And it's speculation, but you could speculate that maybe they've really got someone they've appointed, and it's just a matter of time now. That's speculation. I don't know that. I'm just wonder, right? You hear a statement like that. What are they saying? I wasn't in the room. I didn't hear the inflection. Whatever. But anyway, that's that part of the intel. Now I've got more intel today. Let's jump right to that. Muurinen, class of 25. I tweeted out yesterday. Had a source tell me, look, it's starting to heat up a little bit. This talk about him reclassing to 2025. He's class of 2026, a top 5 rated 5-star. ESPN has him ranked as the number 4 player in that 2026 class. 6'10", from Finland. And we've talked so much about him because he visited Arkansas back in September. A guy that can shoot the 3. He has nice ball skill getting into, mid-range shots. He's an above the rim player. He's a rim protector. He can be a volume rebounder. And he's at Arizona Campus Prep. And so there was a lot of talk, back in the summer leading into the fall, that this is a guy that's going to seriously consider a reclass of 2025. And it was thought that if he did that, he would still be ranked in a loaded 25 class, somewhere around that, maybe inside that top 10. And again, one of the deepest classes ever, especially the quality at the top. So that's a big statement to make, if you move from 26 to 25. It got kind of quiet though. So he visited Arkansas in September. That was on the heels of visits to Utah and Michigan. I had a source who spoke directly with him, and the source told me, he said that his Arkansas visit was better than Utah and Michigan. It was a lot better, something like that. I reported on some of these segments we did back then. He canceled a visit that he had planned after Arkansas. Kentucky was trying to get him to visit, and he opted not at the time. So it's been real quiet through his high school season. There were stretches of it where it looked like he was not on the same pace he was when he tore it up in the Nike EYBL circuit, especially in July during Peach Jam, teaming up with J.J. Andrews, in-state kid from 26th. ESPN has him ranked the 22nd best player in that class. We know he's making an announcement on May 15th between Arkansas, LSU, and Missouri, but they were teammates, and they won that for Brad Bill Elite. They won that Peach Jam title, and he was MVP. Muurinen was. He and JJ were the top 2 players. So, that was really kind of the apex of his, rise in the rankings and this hullabaloo. Like, man, this guy might be the next star. Comparisons to Lauri Markkanen, the Finnish. He's been an all-star in the NBA, coming out of Arizona. That's where he played collegiately a few years ago. So all this big talk. Well, during the high school season, Arizona Campus Prep, he had stretches of games that were, not on the level of what he had been showing. And then it got real quiet about, well, maybe he's not ready to reclass. Maybe he needs to. Now he's 18 years old already. So age-wise, a reclass is not crazy, right? I mean, if he went to 2025, at 18 years old, a lot of the kids in that class that's their age. So he turned 18 back in March. So it's not like he's really young age-wise by doing that. Now, here's the intel part of this. It's not just that it's kind of warming back up to maybe he's making a decision to do that. One of the sources I have said that he's considering, and it's coming from his camp, they're considering of shutting down spring and summer and not doing that. Well, we heard that with Tyron Stokes, but he's going to remain in 26. But sometimes that might be a telltale sign that he's considering once again to reclass. Another part of this conversation I had with a source was that someone else looked at on a national level that covers recruiting said, there's a handful or 6 players that we're trying to figure out, are they going to reclass? And we're getting the feeling that maybe he's as likely as anybody to just go ahead and make the jump. Now, The other part of this information was his representation, TAA, that's Ted Archer Agency. The idea is if he can get a school to commit enough in NIL, it'll probably be enough to get him to go ahead and reclass. So it's kind of a three-pronged part of Intel. One channel saying, he's considering not doing spring and summer. Another that thinks that maybe he's as likely as anybody at a handful of high-level guys to reclass. And then maybe through his agency, they're going to really kick the tires on seeing how much NIL they can gather to go ahead and motivate him and push him to James Tucker. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, DJ Wagner's still only 19. So I guess that's right. I just saw that. I didn't go back and look at DJ's date of birth. So we're keeping our eyes on that. I think one of the interesting things was I remember a few months ago I had a source tell me if he did reclass, it felt like Utah might be the leader there because they may be among several programs not interested in adding a frontliner who was not a big strong guy coming out of high school, had to reclass up, and they would wait till the portal season, some of the teams that were on him, and try to improve there and maybe not look his way. But here we are in portal season and kicking the tires and looking back at how maybe NIL could be improved is a good idea because not every team got everything it needed out of the portal. Arkansas got its two big men, but it doesn't mean that they couldn't use some versatile depth at the 4 spot. And this is what a guy like Mika Muurinen would bring. I have no intel to tell you that Arkansas is a leader. I have heard that Arkansas would continue to recruit him, but I got different feedback on some of that. If it was for a class up, maybe they wouldn't be interested. But I think right now, given where things are, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of Arkansas pursuing this. Calipari's always been someone that likes the reclass thing. He just does. That's in his wheelhouse. And a guy like Muurinen could possibly help Arkansas with depth. And then you're also looking at, is this a guy that maybe you get for 2 years and you pay him NIL for 2 years and can keep him, and he doesn't end up being a one and done? So there's another way to look at it if you're thinking about, okay, be backup depth in year one. Trevor Brazil moves on after next year, and maybe you just slide into that spot and we keep you for another year. I mean, there's more than one way to look at it. There's nothing. I have nothing to say, oh, this is about to happen. This dude's reclassifying. Keep your eye on it. If that was the intel, I would tell you that. I would have probably put that in the tweet last night. One thing I didn't include because I didn't have enough characters to add this in. I mentioned the visits back in the fall, Arkansas, Utah, and Michigan. He recently took a visit to Texas Tech. It's odd that I keep hearing Kansas comes up every time his name comes up and I have conversations. Kansas, who I don't know that if he's been on their campus for sure, if he's planned to visit, but Kansas comes up as one to really keep an eye on for him at some point, maybe, I guess. I keep hearing it, so I've got to take it seriously. But that's the intel on Muurinen, just this idea that maybe it's moving toward that. And it's certainly when we talk about three-point shooting, kind of after Trevor and Brazil, what do you really have that could help at the 4 spot? And then just overall height on that front line depth. You could use one more piece. We've been saying that. So there's nothing we're just making up to justify someone like Mika Muurinen. All these things. I mean, he's a really good 3-point shooter. That's part of what he brings at 6'10". Rim protector. Arkansas and its 2 portal additions on the front line, they're not shot blockers. This guy does that. And again, I mean, I'm not saying that Arkansas would or will be involved if he chooses to reclass. Other than I've just been told every time I check on it that Arkansas hasn't moved on, whether it's termination would be what they would do unless they can keep 6, or if they get more motivated, if they think, well, even if he reclasses and we can keep him 2 years, it's worth the roster spot because we can at least get some depth in year one in theory. You never know how it's going to translate. Again, he had some spotty moments this year, maybe not on the same path as he was through the spring and summer. And so you then have to say, well, if that can happen, then what about when you go from high school to the high major level? So that's always in there. I hope the roster isn't finished. Sealy, I think, is better than advertised, and no one Thank you for the comment. I got through about half of it. Yeah, Seeley's a really good player. I've been covering him for years on all the various, whether it's EYBL, the Arkansas high school level, um, even in workouts and different other scenarios where I pay attention to everything, man. I'm watching players' body language, how they do when they don't think anybody's looking, all that kind of stuff, because it helps me, most of these high level guys, the older they get, the more they start to have to realize they have to tighten up some of their habits. And they also have to, embrace the idea that the higher up they go, they're going to be surrounded by other players that are as good as them, maybe better. And so you always want to see, what is the maturity level? How do they handle that? All these things, Seeley's one of those that, like a lot of freshmen, needs to add strength. He has really good court awareness. At the high school level, he was able to play the 1 through the 3, and did a good job of that even on the EYBL circuit, which is the best of the spring and you're playing against the best. He did a good job on that level too, and he does a really good job of making others better that are on the court with him. So he's got a lot of versatility. He's 6'6", 6'7", somewhere in that range. Speaking of Seeley. All right, 21 minutes in, real quick. Let's get into let's just talk about, I mentioned, morning, Kevin, we appreciate you keeping us in the loop. Thanks, Larry. Larry. Who was that? My glasses, where are they? Yeah, the mock drafts. There were 3 of them. One of them that I really like, I reference it all the time. I tweet his mocks out every time he updates them. He's one of the best out there. Jonathan Wasserman, the lead NBA draft scouting for Bleacher Report. NBA.com actually publishes. They just repost his the mock drafts that he publishes and the content that he puts out. So he's one of the better ones out there, but he just had an update on Tuesday. And we mentioned Carter Knox goes into the draft pool last Thursday. So he's known about that. Wasserman, he's not missing anything. He knows which players are in, even the newer ones. And his mock draft that was updated Tuesday afternoon, I think he had a Due Thero in the late 30s. So that's the early second round. He had Boogie Flan in the early 40s, which is the mid second round. And he did not have Carter Knox in the 59 pick 2-round draft. Typically it would be 60, but you've had teams that have to forfeit picks. I think last year it was 58 picks, the 2-round draft. I think this year it'll be 59. Did not have Carter Knox included. Sports Illustrated, the Draft Digest folks, put out their mock draft, the updated mock draft as well on Tuesday. They also did not have Carter Knox selected. I think they had Boogie Flan going in the mid 30s, so early second round, and this one had Thero in the mid 40s, so that's mid second round. No Carter Knox. Now, there was another mock draft that came out, was published by I've seen this Twitter account, No Ceilings NBA. They did I think their 6th update on the mock draft, and that was yesterday, so Wednesday, the 23rd, and they actually had Carter Knox going at number 36. So they had Due Thero going late first round in the late 20s, so late first round. They had Boogie Flan going in the early 40s, so mid second round. But they had Carter Knox going at number 36. So that's early second round. So let me just tell you about that spot or close to that spot. If you go back to last year's draft, I think San Antonio at the number 36 pick took a guard of an international player that maybe one of those draft and stash. They didn't sign him. He's not in the NBA right now. That happens a lot with the international guys. A lot of that's contractual, and they just go ahead and get the draft rights. And then the year before that, however, Andre Jackson Jr., who was on that UConn team that beat Arkansas in the Sweet 16 and went on to win the national championship, he was drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks with the 36th pick, and he got a guaranteed 2 years at over $3 million, a total of 4 years on the contract, over $7 million. That's about right in that range. I think the 23, what draft was it that Jalen Williams went in? J. Will went in the 22 draft, I believe. Is that right? He went in not that long ago, but J. Will, Arkansas's Jalen Williams, went 34th. So not 36th, but 34th. And he ended up negotiating $4 million guaranteed in the first 2 years. So $2 million each year. And that was also, I think, a 4-year deal overall. The last two not guaranteed. Probably more team friendly uh, terms on those last 2 years, since they fronted maybe a little bit more than you see in that draft range. Typically, it is probably been, some of them have been, 2.5 to 3 million. His was 4 million front ended, but again, I think he didn't make, it probably stayed about the same over the next 2 years, and there was probably more team friendly terms. But it gives you an idea of what some of those offers would be. That's pretty strong guaranteed money if someone's willing to draft you that high. And you say, well, you can make in 1 year, maybe you can make more than half of what the 2-year part of that front end guarantee would be. Well, maybe that's true, but the other thing is, once you go into the NBA, it is a different sport. You're being trained and prepared for that sport, and you're no longer in college dealing with having to, even spend any time with online classes or any of this other stuff that college life brings. You're now a pro, and you're closer to that second contract. So there's many reasons other than just the money where it might be attractive for some to do something like that. Now, this is one mock draft. There's a bunch out there. Mock drafts will change. The fact that 2 mock drafts didn't have him getting even drafted just a few days after he went in doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot either, because we know he's just getting started with this process. He'll get feedback from teams around the league. He may get invited to the NBA draft combine. We'll keep an eye on that. That's mid-May when that takes place, so that's not that far out. Individual works out with teams, other things that can improve and make him start appearing all over the place, all over mock drafts. But I just found it interesting that we've got some that have updated since he's been in there, and 1 out of 3 not only put him in, but they put him in a pretty good spot. So if that turns out to be true, if that becomes a reality, that's going to be a hard sell to get him back. That's why I was talking about the other day, the NIL purse we said was around 9 million for the roster, including Carter Knox, but I wasn't sure if that was a fixed number for him, with uncertainty about what the draft might offer him, because you may have to up that to entitle him to get out of the draft and come back. And I'm not trying to scare anybody with that 36 projection, because it's one mock draft this early. But at the same time, it helps visualize for people what, and I gave you some of the numbers of recent draft picks in that range to give you a picture of maybe what would have in front of him to consider if he thinks he can, some team tells him, look, we got a pick right here. We're going to take you here. If we had a back end first round pick, we would get you with that, but we don't. So we'll get you here if you're not already gone. Stuff like that happens all the time. You'll see teams that have picks all over the place that don't have a spot, that they don't plan on using it to actually get somebody that they want to put on their roster the next year. So they try to trade out of it. If they can't, sometimes they'll burn a second round pick on a guy that they work out some 2-way agreement on. So those things happen. Some players, if they're not going to go high enough, don't want to be drafted. They beg teams not to draft them so they can work out something free agent once the draft's over on some other place that they prefer. So the draft is not always about, God, I hope I get drafted. Sometimes players hope they don't, based on the situation. It's just a crazy thing. And again, Carter Knox, we're keeping an eye on it. 29 minutes in, I'm actually going to get out of here inside of 30 minutes for once in my life. Like I said, we're going to keep our eyes on everything. Right now, the news is, just to recap, the main point here, the headline was staff member telling a confidant, and it's gotten back to me that they're looking to add one more. We'll see if that number changes. Things can change, do change. It's fluid. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Have a great Thursday. If we need to break in with anything later, we will. Until next time, probably see you tomorrow. But until then, take care of yourselves. Thanks for being here. Ta-da. Toodaloo.